Hello, and welcome to Enterprise Data Governance with Azure Purview. My name is Richard Conway, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Elastic Cloud, and I'm really happy to be speaking with you all today about Azure Purview, a new service from Microsoft. So a little bit about me. I am a Microsoft Regional Director and Azure MVP. I am also the co-founder of the UK Azure Users Group and the IoT Innovators and Data Science London. All of these groups you can find on Meetup if you're interested in these things, and they're free to join, and we run regular sessions, especially the UK Azure User Group. We've got a very open and consistent topic. I am a contributor to open source. I have been since 2013, and specifically I'm a big fan of Spark and Storm, and I've contributed to both of those contrib projects. Also Parquet, I've worked on an implementation in Parquet and Apache libcloud, lots of other things across the Azure space and technology space, which you can find on my GitHub, which is Azure Coder, or on Elasticloud's GitHub, which is Elasticloud. I'm the co-founder of Elasticloud and its CEO. We're 150 people across 4 continents, and we're growing, including in Bangalore. I'm a course author, I'm a book author, and a trainer for the Microsoft Analytics in a Day workshops too. So let's go through what we're going to study today. We're talking about enterprise data governance, the why. Why do we need enterprise data governance? We're specifically going to look at this with Purview. So we're going to look at some of the features that Purview has to offer. Then we're going to look at strategies in the enterprise. We're going to look at gaps in offerings. We're going to look at data and control plane strategies as well. So we're going to understand how you can secure Purview, how you can add users to it, what you can control through the portal, and what you can control through the Purview portal. We're going to look at building a catalog with sources and classifications. We're going to discuss sensitivity labels, and we're also going to look at custom classifications as well. And finally, we're going to look at REST APIs and automation. So let's consider enterprise data governance in general, and we'll look at some of the core features of Purview, but we'll talk very much more generally about why we need this. So data estates are growing year on year, and as more and more companies move to the cloud, we have a certain tolerance, and we generally tend to build data silos, to lose track of our data. So one key feature that we have to put in place is a discovery element. And over the years, I've worked with lots of companies who just even run out of storage accounts that they can use in their subscriptions on Azure because they go past hard limits, because too many people are working on different projects and there's no governed program of work. So a key importance here is the discovery of data. Can you build crawlers which will allow you to read data from various systems, whether they be ADLS, SQL, Data Explorer, Hive Metastores, and Databricks? All of these things are really important to be able to track and discover and then register data sets as and when you find them. And I think that for some of the customers that I've worked for in the past, there needs to be a key understanding these days that data leakage is all important. It can lead to fines, it can lead to huge reputational risk and credibility losses. So one of the things that we need to achieve with a data governance solution is to be able to tighten this so that we know where all of our data is and what it contains and whether it's at risk if we share it. The other key feature that we need to understand is relationships. So it's all important to understand relationships between data sets and also relationships between owners and experts as well, that actually govern the data and manage the risk, and also the relationships that you'll find as data changes. So we have a core concept called data lineage, and data lineage is an all-important concept because what it does is it tells us how we start with a data set, which we call provenance, and all of the transformations that occur to that data set, to the extent that we can follow almost like a graph every single change and every single branch of the tree that this data is transformed to. And in that way, we can build a graph of how this data has moved through our platform. Another key capability is to give users the ability to be able to search for these data sets, because again, it's all important to be able to say that the data in itself is useless unless people can find it. So you can discover it, you can catalog it, you can classify it, you can build all these relationships, but unless you can search and you can let people know where this is, it's not going to be very useful. And then correspondingly and lastly, we need to have the concept of insight. So it's really important for people to be able to get feedback on their data sets. We need them to be able to understand who's been doing the searching, what things have been discovered, and to be able to build almost like a complete audit trail that you can represent in a tabular form or graphically, so that people actually know what the data governance tool has been doing and discovering. So let's look at some common issues that we'll find within an enterprise data governance strategy. The top one is being able to discover data from multiple sources. This is an all-important concept. We might have data in SQL, we might have data in a data lake, we might have data in Hive, we might even have data in S3, in AWS, in another cloud. We might have data in an old SAP platform, and we need to be able to discover these sources so that we can list them in our catalog. Once we've done that, we need to be able to track the movement of data across different boundaries. So how is data being transformed? That core concept that we discussed of data lineage. Can we show and represent the transformations of our data sets across these different boundaries? We also particularly want to classify data based on column values. So an important aspect here is to be able to see what's in our data, to be able to sample it, and then to say, well, this is an email, or this is a name, or this is a date, and be able to classify this enough so that we can know whether this data is private data, secret data, and maybe have a higher level of classification. And we'll be discussing briefly towards the end of this talk things like sensitivity labels, which you can import, and just like sensitivity labels can be applied to your M365 capability in Office, you can do exactly the same thing in Purview. And then the ability to track data owners and experts. In many of the projects that I've been in, it's actually been quite difficult even to find data owners. So making it mandatory that all data sets that you discover have to have an owner and they're listed in Azure Purview is really key. And also experts, data types, schemas, there's a lot of expert knowledge that has gone into this that has taken many, many years for many people. So being able to list experts with reference to discovered data sets is all important as well, so that you know who to ask when you're processing data, when you need to use it to build analytics or something like that. Then there's the ability to track changes. Schemas change all the time. So if you're discovering data, you're also discovering schemas. And it's all important to be able to track changes and updates in those schemas over time. And then aside from just the data, it's important to have a domain-specific glossary, a business glossary of terms which relate to data that's being discovered. So one of the key capabilities that we would want to build in is build lots of different glossaries from different business units so that columns could be recognized and we could tag these with metadata as we discover our data sets in the Purview portal. So let's look at some Purview concepts. From the top down, one core concept that we have is this idea of scans. Scans are all important in that they allow us to scan, like as a one-off or regularly, any data source, and then be able to classify that data source so that we can have a clear understanding of the data that's present in the source, like be it ADLS, the Azure Data Lake Store, or SQL. Purview has the concept of glossaries where we can upload highly complex business glossaries which allow us to effectively add core capabilities of being able to flag, and I'll give you an example. If you run a bank and you're in a department with bond sales, then you may be picking up glossary terms like credit or rates instruments. And if you saw these in the description field, you might want to tag the column where you with the business glossary to say that it's present in this field. Correspondingly, you have lineage, and lineage, as we said, is all important. It's how the data flows through the platform, how it's orchestrated, how it's transformed. And this ends up looking like quite a complex graph. So being able to track that both visually and being able to have the capability to actually even see that, given that there are so many data processing tools, whether it's HD Insight, whether it's Azure Databricks, whether it's some AWS tools, whether it's Data Factory, whether it's stored procedures in SQL. There are loads of different concepts here. So lineage is quite tough, but this is also a core Purview feature. Discovery, again, all important. Purview has this concept of being able to crawl a source and then effectively listing the contents. And it does this in some interesting ways that we'll look at when we take a walk through Purview. Then we want to make sure that that only the people that need to see these data sets and within Purview, and also be able to modify data sets, modify the metadata in data sets, being able to operate scans, being able to curate data, that we've got a fine-grained access control model. And Purview actually supports 5 different roles where you can use Active Directory and security groups, as well as users, to be able to delegate control over Purview sources. Then we have the fact that it's open source. One of the key concepts that Purview's built on top of is called the Atlas catalog. Atlas is an Apache toolset, and it allows us to create a common format with a common set of APIs, which you can represent through JSON REST APIs. And what this does is it allows us to track the sources, track lineage, track the registration of data sets, just about everything, and have it completely compatible with an open source capability. Then lastly, a key feature of Purview is the ability to have privacy. So one of the things which Microsoft rely on is companies to be able to create virtual networks or VNets, and Purview supports this. So some of you who have used Azure Data Explorer in the past will see concepts within Azure Purview like integration runtimes, which are virtual machines which allow you to run Purview scans and other things from within your virtual network, within your VNet, so that everything is bespoke and secured. This is quite an interesting slide that I took from the Microsoft website. It actually talks, it's a decision tree, which we're going to look at shortly. And the reason that it's quite interesting is because we have it goes through a decision tree to work out how things are accessed. So this in particular will look at whether or not we've got private endpoints set up, whether or not we're going to use managed identities or we're going to use keys, whether we're using integration runtimes. But I think this is quite an important slide because what it does is it shows that there is a clear indication of how Purview can connect to different data sources, and we'll look at this now as we move to the Azure portal to see what Purview can do. But bear this slide in mind because it's all encompassing as to how we connect to different sources. And for now, let's look at a tour of Purview from scans and classifications. Okay, so looking at the Azure portal, we have pre-created a set of sources, and what we'll find is that these sources tell us something about the type of experiments that we're going to do today. So I'm going to start by let's start by listing them. We've got a data factory, service, Purview. We've got a SQL Server, a database, a storage account, which is actually a hierarchical namespace store. So it is a data lake to all intents and purposes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and you'll see that automatically there's an open Purview Studio. If we look, we can see some very, very familiar things. There's a few things that you might be new to. There's a managed event hub namespace, a managed storage account, which underpins this, and a managed resource group, which is created when you create the Purview instance. And then correspondingly, you can see we've got networking. So this is for demo purposes, but we've got we've got an allow all on because this is very, very short-lived. But most notably, what we probably do is set up either private endpoint connections or these ingestion private endpoint connections so that we can connect to sources and ingest data in this way. But let's go back to our overview, and we're going to open the Purview portal, use our credentials. You can see that it is literally gone to a different screen, which is now web.purview.azure.com. Now I've already done a few things you can see here, but let me give you a 360-degree tour of Purview from now. So we're going to take this from the top where we have this our data catalog, our home page, and our data map. So there's lots and lots of concepts here. We talked about scans. One of the things that that we've done here is we have registered sources. But if you look here, we've got a root collection. So we start at the root, and we can add collections to this root. And I've already added a collection called secure datasets, and we can keep adding collection after collection, and we have this collection path. The importance in this is that we can assign roles to this, and you can see here that in this collection we've got a collection admin that can edit collection details and sub collections, and a data source admin, so can manage data sources and scans. Data curators can perform create, read, modify, and delete actions on catalog data objects and establish relationships between the objects and data readers. So all in all, there's a set of these that we can leverage. So let's go back to the sources, and what we'll do is we'll register another source, and I've got another source as well. So I've created a SQL database, and I'm going to just register this now, and I'm going to call this Azure SQL DPS. I'll pick the right Azure subscription. I've got a number of servers in this subscription, but it's here in dataconf. Now I've got a set of collections. Now this is the root, or I can add to another collection, which I will, called Azure, secure dataset. So let me register that. Okay, and you can see I can move the view here, and our view details are that. I can edit this as a source and apply that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on New Scan. I've actually got nothing in this yet. Now you can see that we spoke about a few concepts such as the auto resolve runtime. It's got the endpoint there, database endpoint, but if I choose that, it will tell me that I have to set this up as the Purview managed identity. Or I could create some new credentials. So let me create some new credentials here, and I'll call this SQL creds. You can see it's got SQL authentication. It will force me to use the right authentication. Now I don't actually, I haven't actually set a key vault up, as you know, so maybe what we'll do is just go back to this, but I wanted to walk you through how we would do this. Now, for now, we are going to look at some of the other things within this. So we've got our collections, which we've discussed. Now we have this thing called scan rule sets, and you can see that for all of the various sources, we've got scan rules, and we have system rules, which when they discover files like CSVs, JSONs, Parquet, etc., it will apply all of these different rules. and these rules are regexes, if you like. Okay, and so it will discover, it will classify, and it will add those to a particular column as we need to. And I can create a new scan rule set here, and I can apply this to any of those sources. Correspondingly, we spoke about the integration runtime, so I can take these self-hosted integration runtimes or shears to do the scans, and these will scan on the basis of being able to pick up use a virtual machine with a piece of software and being able to scan from that virtual machine on a private network. So if you like, you would have private endpoints, private link, you would have service endpoints set up so that all the scans would be done on a bespoke network. Then we have this idea of classification. So you can see here that we've got ABA routing number, and this ABA routing number has a corresponding regex expression, and it can be found in this financial space here. So it's tagged against finance. We can also create custom things. So this is one that I created earlier, which is based on a type of classification and applied to it. What we'll find is that we can create our own classification rules, which are either regular expressions. So if it does a scan and it gets a sense of a discovery within a data set, you can use a regular expression to say, is this an email, or is this a name, or is this a birthday? Or you can use a dictionary. So you can use a set of terms, which I've done in this case, and that set of terms can just have comma separated values in a CSV or a TSV file that you can just upload, and it will flag the classification if it discovers it. So let's carry on, see a little bit more of Purview. So you can see from the top down that you have like assets, scans. You can see when scans have succeeded. You have the business glossary that we were talking about, the classifications that are discovered, sensitivity labels, and file extensions. So we'll go to the last one, and this is just being able to change a few things. We've got metrics, which we can configure in Azure Monitor. We've got our lineage connection, so we can create a connection to a data factory instance. So I can pick, let's pick my Azure subscription because we're going to do this later. I've got this data conf, and I can create that link between the data factory. And now that this is connected, we should be able to pick up lineage there. It also picks up lineage from Azure Data Share, and we can add sets of credentials, and we can have connections to Key Vault, which we'll do shortly. So if we just look from the top down, I created some things earlier, and we're going to browse our assets. And I did a scan, and I created this Azure Data Lake storage Gen 2 service with a landing container, a PII folder, and something called set.json, set1.json. And interestingly, it has picked up that this particular file name, and we'll take a quick look at it because it's here. So if we look through Storage Explorer, through landing, through PII, you can see it's set1.json. Okay. So if we go back to our Azure Purview instance, it's picked up the fact that this is set_n, right? So it could expect a set2.json, which will give it a try shortly. Now, if we look at the actual asset itself, what's interesting is that this data, it found an email address, it found a world city, it found everything in the schema, so birth date, email, full name, office city, start date. It's actually flagged these as strings, not as ISO dates, but that's fine. And as we do things to that file, we should be able to pick that up through our lineage. We also have contacts, so if we want to edit those, I can set myself up here as the data owner and save that. And we can also set data experts up as well. And it's a really, really handy feature to be able to do that. And it will also pick up other related data sets where it sees similar items. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a we're going to take a look at the source data here, which is in this set1.json, and I'm going to just open this with code, and it's flagged it as JSON already, but now I'm going to save this as set2.json. Let's save that, and I am going to just upload this to this PII folder. Second, let's try it from here. Okay. So let's add set2.json. We shall upload that. And now we've got two files. What's kind of interesting is that it's worth doing a quick experiment to see how this picks up the pattern. So what we're going to do is, if we go back to our source and we browse our assets from the top, look at our storage, what we'll want to do is to run a scan. So let's actually go to our scans here. Sorry, too many clicks, but this represents a new scan, and you can see that we've already set up the Purview MSI. And just to be clear about this, there are two things that need to occur here, right? In order for an MSI to have access to this storage account, we need to use our control plane. We need to add the MSI is already in the name of data_conf. So let's add this as the storage blob data reader, and we'll data_conf 2021. Now, because I've named both the storage account and also the data factory as data_conf, it's going to get a little bit confused. It's already been assigned, so it should kick it back, but you see that that's what you need to do. So on our Storage Explorer as well, if we click on containers, we should be able to manage access, and you can see that data_conf 2021 is added there. We look at the permissions, it's been given read permissions on that folder as well. So they're the two things that you need to do to be able to access this. But for now, we'll just make sure that we can connect, and we are going to continue with that scan. And it should pick up Yes, the files. We'll take the system default rule set here, which we looked at before, and rather than setting up recurring scans, which we'll probably do for an enterprise pattern, we'll just set up a one-off so that we can scan immediately. Okay. So we are going to do a very, very straightforward thing now, where we take the data that we've created here in set1, set2 JSON, which the new scan picked up. Then we are going to do a copy activity to copy that so that we can track the lineage. So let's go to Azure Data Factory. If you haven't used this before, it's a fantastic data orchestration tool. We're going to have to set up a couple of linked services. We haven't set up a code repository yet. So let's start by setting up our linked services. We need to be able to connect to our Data Lake Gen 2 because we're going to copy between two folders, and let's call this lineage experiment. We're going to just carry on using our account key. They pick the appropriate storage account, which is this one, and let's test the connection. Okay, we will create that storage link, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a copy pipeline. So first thing I'm going to do is just add a new data set, and I'm just going to call this data set. So we know that this data is JSON data. We also know that the source is this. So let's continue. Here's our JSON data set. Let's continue here. We'll call this source. Set this up here. We're going to choose a sample file so that we can sample the schema, and click OK. Okay, and it's picked up our schema. It's picked up pretty much all strings. Okay, so now we're just going to add another data set, which we're going to call sync. Choose JSON as well, and this is where we're going to copy this to. So same thing. It's going to be the same schema as well. So it's a nice easy one. It's just a straight copy. And now that we've got our sources complete, let's add a new pipeline. And let's call this pipeline lineage. And we are going to, we're going to take a copy activity. So let's call this copy for Purview. And our source is going to be a source. And we're going to map that to our source container plus PII. So I think it's landing start.json, and we're going to copy that to the sync here. Actually, we don't need that. Behavior. Okay. And we're going to import the schemas, and we should be able to copy from one data source here, and let's just add our file path. We're in landing, we're in PII, and it's that. And then our sync, which is landing PII to okay. Our pipeline. Let's preview that. Oops, duplicated landing there. Don't want to do that. Fantastic. And brilliant. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's just publish that. Oh, mapping sync is empty. So here we go. So following email, just make sure that everything maps. Birth date, office, city. So city, start date. And it looks like there's an extra column, which is a shame. In fact, let's remove that. And that should be everything we need. We're going to publish this to the factory. We're going to trigger this now. And with a bit of luck, we will have our files copied. Oops, wrong tab. And it succeeded. Let's see whether it did actually do the copy. That's the test. Okay. Right, and we've got set1 and set2.json. So with that successful pipeline, one of the things that we can do is, if you look on the actual set, so within our data catalog, we can just go to browse assets, secure data, and right at the bottom, we've got that set in PII. Now, under our lineage tab, what we can see is that we've got a copy activity. It's picked everything up, the resource that it's used, and it's also, you can see, done a copy activity to PII too. So quite powerful stuff where we can show the whole graph through these copy activities via lineage. It's also important to understand that there are lots of different ways to use Purview, and one key way that you have to use whenever you build an enterprise product is to apply automation. So just some key features that we can show here. I've created a I've created an app registration called Purview CLI. I've also created another one called Purview here, and I want to show the two different use cases. Now, it's a bit of a common misnomer, so don't get this wrong, but there's an I am section here in the actual Purview account. Don't use that. The way that you should do this is you start with collections. So if you go to a data map, at the root, if you want to give the app access to all of the various sources, you need to put it in role. So if we click on details here, you can see that there's role assignments at the root, and what I've done is I have added from here, click this button, data source admin, both Purview and Purview CLI to this, the app registration, and I've also added it to curators so that we can perform, modify, and do various actions. In addition, there's also the ability to register. So I've created that default key view. There's the ability to register this and to keep credentials there. So you can store service credential safely through this and then use them within Purview so that you can use service principals rather than the managed identity to access various data sources. So if we go back to the map again, we've got it on the root, and we should have inherited all the way down here. Oops, should have inherited all the way down from the root so that we can run scans and we can do all sorts of other bits and pieces. Now, if we look at how this programmatic access is actually going to work, there's a couple of ways that we've set up here. So there is a fantastic tool by Tegan Rifford called the Azure, the Purview CLI, and the Purview CLI, you can find it on his GitHub account, but the Purview CLI allows you to set a bunch of different environment variables. So on my CV, you can see client secrets, IDs that I've set, and I'll remove these straight afterwards. And a Purview name, which is DataConf 2021. Now what this then allows me to do is, if I then run something like this, PV scan read data sources, it will give me a CLI type thing which will allow me to see the data sources that I've mapped and I've set, and I then should be able to use those. And you can see that there's a top level collection reference, which is really helpful to understand these sources. Now that's not the only way that you can interact. If we look through here, there's a set of different things that we can do. So we can get an access token here, and here what we can do is, you can see that the access token will allow you to get all the type definitions. You can see this in nicely formatted JSON here, where we can look at categories, things, enumerations. There are other types of things called entities and relationships. So one of the things that you'll have is like a complete catalog of all of the all of the pieces, capabilities that you would find within within Apache Atlas, and you can just list it here, and effectively you can just parse that catalog as JSON. You can also affect things like scans as well, just like you can affect scans through here, and you can find that with Purview scans you can do things like read. Let's find something without any switches. Read, scan, rule sets. So covering the full scope. Nothing in there, but covering the full scope of the APIs. So you can imagine that you can start scans here. You can have scan names, pass payload files, so you can have complete command and control over all of the elements on the within Purview using the underlying SDKs. So just to round off, we have looked at a variety of different things today. We've looked at core Purview. We've spoken about some elements of data governance. There are a huge number of enterprise patterns and practices, and this talk really scratches the surface. But there's patterns that you're going to understand over time if you're really interested in Purview, around syncing hierarchies of Purview instances, assurance that you have like a central instance and things are locked down, so that you can only view the Purview data that you're allowed to see within a collection. So as a result of that, there's literally complete command and control over who can see various collections within the catalog. Just to round off, special thank you for Microsoft for supporting Data Platform Geeks and SQL Server Geeks. And thank you very much. There are 3 ways to win prizes: posting your selfie with hashtag DPS 2021, and feel free to give session and conference feedback. You can always reach out to me if you want to discuss some of the features which are constantly emerging, and please bear in mind that that Purview is still in public preview, but by and large a lot of the features are beginning to come to the fore, so you have a lot of fun playing around with some of the automation. Anyway, thank you for your attention, and look forward to speaking to some of you in the Q&A.